Yo, what up, everybody? It's your boy Carson Fox with another edition of Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports. Going back to the well for just the second time since I started this channel on talking about Mountaineer hoops, transitioning away from football just at least for this episode because we have to conclude this chapter, arguably the most woeful chapter in the 100-year history of West Virginia Mountaineer men's basketball, and talk about the worst season in program history, coming to a close today, officially with the end of the season yesterday in the Big 12 tournament. 14 seed West Virginia losing to the 11 seed Cincinnati Bearcats, 90-85 in a second half in which the Mountaineers gave up 54 points. Only for the next day, actually it even just happened right after the flight back home, Athletic Director Wren Baker meeting with Josh Eilert, meeting with the team, telling them apparently at 2 a.m. this morning that West Virginia would be moving in a new direction at the helm of the program, removing the interim tag away from Josh Eilert, and officially opening the search, moving nationally to the new head coach. So I think everybody got that. If you're paying attention to social media today, you get that news, is that West Virginia is moving on. So to conclude the 2023-2024 season, I think first and foremost, got to give a thanks, a bless, and just blessings to the interim head coach, Josh Eilert. The circumstances in which you want to take your first overhead coaching job, I don't think anyone in the country would have wanted them in the circumstances in which Josh Eilert received this position too. Everyone always says you don't want to necessarily follow the legend, but when a legend is booted out without grace from the university for reasons that we're all doing because of his own doing, it was just, a sour taste in which, Josh Eilert, who had been on the bench for the Mountaineers, been a part of the program for over a decade, finally gets his shot, wants this, and is all for it, goes over into Europe to follow his new player, to see him compete on the European stage, and Jesse Edwards over the summer does everything in his humanly possible to try and re-recruit guys that ended up leaving the program, and what he ended up getting was 3 or 4 key players for this upcoming season, which had the potential pre-June to be a national, or at least a Big 12 conference contender, at least on paper. And instead, we're talking about it being the worst season in program history. And then it was just a whole bunch of series of unfortunate events, like Lemony Snicket's book series, from a day before the season was supposed to start, or like a week or month before. Let me back up. The Kirk Risa and Noah Farrakhan suspensions, waiver denials for Noah Farrakhan, waiver denial for Raekwon Battle, and then suspension from the NCAA by Kirk Risa set West Virginia back in its continuity, development, everything that you are supposed to do to develop that type of chemistry, knowing what players are going to do, and building that team chemistry that you're supposed to even have the spring, summer beforehand, that West Virginia was late canceling its international trip over the summer of 2023, getting into the season, and now you don't have three key contributors. So you never develop that type of continuity that you need with Krisa, with Battle. And then in the preseason scrimmage, a cook, your big transfer, got 6th man off the bench, really, goes and has a heart episode, and he's kind of in and out of the lineup throughout the entire season, wanting to watch him, goes through that. That's terribly unfortunate. Then, once you get those guys nearly back, because of you fighting up against the NCAA, Jesse Edwards misses an entire year's worth of history of the season. So again, can't play at full capacity. You're missing arguably your best player or second best player, your best player inside at least. and you just never gel. And then once you finally get to full strength, you have your best soldiers to fight the battles. You're so far, and you've already lost to Radford. You've already had so many losses in the Big 12 season that I got on here, what was it, 8 weeks ago, and told you, it was right before the Kansas game. I said, West Virginia's probably going to go and beat Kansas on Saturday. And what do you know? They freaking did. Best part of the whole season. And then what did they go down the stretch? They win like 3 games the rest of the way out. Like, there were, don't get me wrong, there were first-year head coaching mistakes that Josh Eilert and this staff made, especially on the defensive end, turning the ball over, just never got but it was just from a team standpoint, you didn't ever have the true desire until it was too late. And full health, full eligibility, you name it. So for Josh Eilert and this staff to not make mistakes, or not to make excuses, to continue to work hard, try and motivate this team to all that it possibly could. And, he's got to live with this on his record. He could have said no, once West Virginia fired Bob Huggins, he could have passed, could have looked for a different opportunity, but stepped up, said yes. And now the way he's probably going to be rewarded is a new head coach with a new staff is going to come in, and he loses what was his old assistantship job, which paid a nice living in Morgantown, been there for decades. Now he's got to go find something else. So another jab against, or just demerit against Bob Huggins for his issues. West Virginia had a good thing going as a program with him at the helm, even though it hasn't been the greatest last 5-6 years since Javon Carter went to the NBA. But you've been a nationally relevant program, and you had a stable staff. Made some changes last year, but at least for Josh Eilert's concerned, and now he's going to be looking for somewhere else. So just the way the cookie crumbles, goes out there. He has now this head coaching record that looks abysmal, and he's got to try and pick up the pieces and move forward. You have an assistant coach who is arguably one or two of the most important players for your program in the last 50 years, in Deshaun Butler, who's no longer going to be a part of this staff. Alex Ruoff. I know Jordan McCabe came back, but like DeMar Johnson, it's just like the staff's now blown up. And you take a look at the roster, and you look up and down the roster, and really you're losing so many different senior pieces. I don't see how a guy like Kirk Carissa or Noah Farrakhan, who have another additional year of COVID eligibility, are going to want to stick around when this program only has, I think, 8 scholarships players. How are they going to compete in this Big 12 conference with, one high school recruit coming in for next year? So this program is starting at bare bottom. The other thing I will say about this season, that happened today, that was, whoa, holy moly. I wasn't listening to it live, but I've heard enough of the replays on Twitter from Hoppy Kercheval and WV Metro News' interview with Arizona Diamondbacks owner and huge WVU mega donor Ken Kendrick, and blasting the idea of Bob Huggins returning. I think at least Wren Baker put it gracefully when asked about Bob Huggins, saying, I have great admiration and respect for what Coach did here. It's important to recognize the past while being focused on the future. So saying it with grace there. I mean, the quotes from good old Ken Kendrick were, whoa. I think in WVU, in their handling of Bob Huggins' debacle, probably were too lenient with him. Had he worked for me, he would have not had a job after he engaged in his, I'll just paraphrase here, series of remarks back in the spring, and then retained under very difficult circumstances, then lost his job as a result of a drunken stupor, I will call it. So I think he has no place in the lives of young men who deserve quality leadership. I would be one who would wonder about the mental capacity of any leader of any university who would consider hiring him for a coaching position. Woo! Flames, man. And I mean, whether you think that's too harsh, whether you think that or you think that's justified, is neither here nor there because nothing's going to make anything better about the situation. You had a guy who was a beloved figure in this state, played for the university, coached now for over a decade, led West Virginia to its first Final Four appearance since Jerry West was in uniform. I mean, he did so many great things for the university, for the state, but that chapter's over, unfortunately. If he goes and he finds a different school to finish out his coaching career at is he 70 years old or 71? More power to him. Like, that's what he can go do if somebody else wants to hire him and he still wants to coach and still wants to recruit and do all this. But clearly this chapter with the West Virginia is over. And I think that because I think there was enough rumors for Kendrick, for Baker to comment on these things, given Huggins' attendance at WVU Senior Day, and he'd just been around the entire season. Like, I just think that rumor would continue to swirl out there, is that Huggins would be getting his job back. But that is a solid zero at this point in time. So, I'd been thinking about it since I made that video about 6 to 8 weeks ago. If, what's West Virginia's best move forward? Where does West Virginia go from here? And I'd be lying to you if I didn't think it over in my mind over these last 6 to 8 weeks. If he's had a change of heart, if he's asked for forgiveness and reconciled and, is truthful and wouldn't make any mistakes any down the line moving forward, is the best move to bring Bob Huggins back, because he still has, name recognition nationally with recruits, coaches, you name it. Like, they associate Bob Huggins with high quality. He's a Hall of Famer, the winningest active, or if he were to be back in the game, active head coach in college basketball. Like, come on now, you'd be crazy. But I just think that the damage is too deep this year, at least from a financial, that's the way I always think about things, financial perspective. Everything that was bet on and invested in this team for this year specifically, is that West Virginia, from everything that now Country Roads Trust in tandem with West Virginia was doing for the football team and investment for this 2024 season, is what West Virginia, as we all know, were doing about 11 months ago. Was you were trying to find in a Jesse Edwards and Raekwon Battle and Kirk Risa 3 top pieces in the transfer portal with some of the returners that West Virginia was going to have, namely a Trey Mitchell, namely the little guard, I'm losing my mind, who's now at Texas Tech, James Okonkwo going to North Carolina. Like, you had Mo Wagi transferring to Alabama. Like, there were pieces that could have been added to with this core if it gelled right over the spring and summer with Huggins as coaching, could have challenged. But now you blew it up. So where does West Virginia go from here? And what I said 6 to 8 weeks ago, and I still do think this at my core, and like what would be my main idea of this message would be, the investment in football is a much better investment and better ROI than it is in basketball, at least looking right now. But I think it's so tough because obviously everyone's heard the news of the last year about the financial issues that WVU has gone through with the cuts to the faculty there, the financial struggles, the vote of no confidence from the faculty into President Gee. Somehow, some way, the Board of Trustees renewed his contract for a whole nother year. So we're going to be looking at 2025. June of 2025 when he finally retires. But it's just kind of a weird period right now, not only from the university standpoint, but also just looking at the bigger context of collegiate athletics right now with what all is happening with the courts and lawsuits all surrounding about player employment, either player employment, revenue sharing, name, image, and likeness, and all that there is to it. That 2021, July of 2021 was the opening of Pandora's box, and we're still feeling the effects of it, and we're going to until gargantuan, earth-shattering decisions are made. And having a conversation with a coworker about this today, who we're both very knowledgeable about what happens in college athletics and research all of this stuff, is that a dramatic shift is coming. Then I don't want to kind of derail this conversation, so stay with me as best you can, because I know you want to hear about how this ties into West Virginia, and if you're not caring about lawsuits and what happens with suits behind closed doors with TV executives and that, and the other thing, but bear with me just here for at least a couple of minutes. Is the dramatic shift that's happening in college athletics and we saw this a couple of weeks ago or a month ago or so with the National Labor Relations Board and Dartmouth basketball, and saying that the common agency test, they met the standards to be employees as student athletes who go to the school and play basketball, or now is equal to, in the eyes of the law, as faculty and facilities workers and everybody else, because of that they play a sport and have to go to practice and have to lift weights and have to play games and blah, 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 blah. So I'm not going to get up here and make part of this video about why I don't think that athletes are employees. I'm not going to go there, even though that is how I feel, that they're not that same way. I think I err toward the side of what Nick Saban was saying yesterday on Capitol Hill and so many others. But if college football can break away from the rest of the NCAA, create its own rules that everybody agrees to, that's what's coming. There's just going to be this dramatic shift, at least at the Division I Power 5 level. And, to some extent, some of the G5 players, but more so the Power 4 level, and even going down, even hyper down to the Big Ten and the SEC, is that there are going to be a select group of schools who can financially make it through this litigation process, through what's happening, what's going to, where crap is going to hit the fan is next January, when the House versus NCAA case comes up, and it'll probably go all the way up to the Supreme Court, and whether it's back pay to student athletes. And I don't know how they're going to determine this. Is it going back all the way to the beginning of time with everybody who's alive and so on and so forth? I don't know how House wins this case, in that back pay to student athletes through before NIL was ever a thing, and paying them for their services. Or there's another court case going on with students from all these different obscure or Olympic sports against the University of Oregon. And all of these court cases are going to probably destroy, if they haven't already destroyed, the amateur model that the NCAA and college sports have stood on since the beginning of time. But even going further, this quasi pay-for-play type of system, predominantly to football players, some men's basketball players, that is currently existing in the ecosystem that is college athletics, with payments through these NIL collectives, in West Virginia's case, Country Roads Trust. So, and donor fatigue, you can read articles about that on The Athletic and on 3, and I've talked about this for about a year now, is that West Virginia fans, you're probably out there, you're watching them, even though the support for Country Roads Trust, especially over the course of the last year, has been incredible, to a level that I think that so many hardcore fans expect it to be. But you're putting your money where your mouth is with the monthly contributions, annual contributions, and you're seeing that results in retention and bringing back an Aubrey Burks, bringing back a CJ Donaldson. Even last spring, going out there, getting Jesse Edwards, going out there and getting Kirk Creesa and Raekwon Battle. Like, West Virginia is competing the best it can for what is the most important commodity is Jimmy's and Joe's, the best football and best men's basketball players you can get. So that's where I think, to round out my point here, is yes, that the investment in football has to continue to be there if you want West Virginia, with Neil Brown at the helm of the program for the next at least 4 years. But we know how big this 2024 season is. But I think men's basketball can coexist on that same level. I'm very scared for baseball. I'm very scared for wrestling. I'm very scared for name your other Olympic sport here. When the football team, 2 years ago, I've referenced this many a times, according to Stephen Ford, was being paid in NIL dollars, $1 million. If what Charlie Baker proposed in his original proposal of the new Division I, being that every collegiate athlete is paid to be a part of the new Division I, $30,000 a year. I just did the math. I didn't go up and here do all the research of how many athletes West Virginia has across all of its sports, but I'm just round number here. If they have 500 athletes, which is a very high number, it might not be that high, and you're paying each one $30,000, that's $15 million annually that West Virginia is going to have to come up with to pay its student athletes to compete. What? I mean, I think I err on the side of Jim Phillips, the ACC commissioner. What he said on Capitol Hill yesterday is that what you're going to see is a predominant number of Division I schools keep football, keep men's basketball, because those are the revenue drivers, and have to have commensurate numbers, equal number of payments to female athletes. So what does that mean for those other sports, especially when you've invested so much in the new facility at the baseball field? Facility standpoint, coaches, do those sport programs get cut? I don't think those are ultimately good moves, because at the end of the day, what is it, and this is to my ultimate point, is where WVU goes from here, is what does West Virginia University want to be? I think right at the beginning of Gordon Gee's presidency, at the end of the Big East era, transitioning into the Big 12, enrollment numbers were not at a nice level, and Gee had this envisioning that West Virginia was going to get to 40,000. And if you look across Morgantown and all the development that's happened, it has really built up over the course of West Virginia's time in the Big 12, from the city standpoint, but also the university and its facilities. So if you don't invest as heavily as you could into men's basketball, you are doing so with football. You're cutting your nose off to spite your face. If you're not going to pay these players, then you don't have a baseball team. Then it doesn't have the fan interaction to the boosters who are or alumni, not support back to the university as much as they could because of not having that specific sport and bringing them back. You get where I'm going with this, is that you're essentially downsizing. You're downsizing if you don't put as much of a financial commitment into these different programs as you could. My worry is just, I totally respected that West Virginia was financially compensating Bob Huggins to the level that constituted him being, the 8th highest paid head coach in men's basketball. You weren't getting those kind of results that deserve that kind of salary since Javon Carter and Daxter Miles graduated. But West Virginia got to the NCAA tournament a few years ago, won a game, and I think played Syracuse in the round of 32. And then last year made the tournament, lost to Maryland, obviously, in the first game, as we know. So Huggins wasn't really living up to his contract of being to being paid there. So what I see is, with dark storm clouds all around college athletics, and it's not darkest on West Virginia. I'm just saying that the future was very uncertain. You're steering the Black Pearl into storms, and you don't know what's out onto the other side. You don't know whether you're driving the Titanic and there's an iceberg out there, with what's happening with the potential breakaway of the SEC, the Big Ten, of which West Virginia is not a part of right now. Uncertainty surrounding the ACC and what's happening with it. But then, how is football going to be governed? How's revenue sharing going to happen? What will happen with basketball? So on and so forth. So it's going to come down to people who get paid a lot more than me. Gordon Gee, Wren Baker. So far, awesome hires by Wren Baker. Going out there and finding Mark Kellogg at the women's basketball position and what they've been able to do this year, solid find. So if he can do the same here, and he hired a guy in Grant McCasland who moved up from North Texas up to Texas Tech this past year, and is now getting paid $3 million per year, can West Virginia go and find a guy like that, who for one is not going to be afraid of the challenge of competing night in and night out in the Big 12 conference, which is the toughest conference and has been for a few years now in the land in college basketball, but also can go and recruit. And how does West Virginia, Country Roads Trust financially support this basketball program after what was really dead money spent on all of these players loaded up because of this year? Do they do that again? Does Country Roads Trust, and this is the thing we don't ever get the answer for with Country Roads Trust, and the dynamic between the athletic department and how that all works in the back room is Baker working alongside Stephen Ford. Stephen Ford controls the payroll, essentially, for all the different teams and how they're paying the players. And if football has now gone exponentially up, as I think it has over the course of this last off season, basketball was here at that same level. Is basketball brought down so football can thrive? And why I think that's a good move, a good decision at least, theoretically, is look at Colorado right now. I know it's predominantly because of the Deion Sanders effect and everything, the national attention that's being put on Colorado because of exactly that. But there's a lot of momentum around, at least, from publicity and attracting a talent level that Colorado hasn't had before. They're up 20% in, I think, they've exceeded 20,000 applications or 20% higher than they had been in applications. That's the number, which exceeding, I think, what they've had before, 20,000. So it's like, that's what you want. You want to have thriving athletic programs, especially in your men's sports, because that's what gets on TV. So if the football team can go out there, contend for a Big 12 title this year, can get to the college football playoff, it's only going to pay dividends, and then what's going to turn into student enrollment and coming at WVU and wanting to build up and I know that there are more home basketball games than there are home football games. You only make your money on 6 to 7 home games for an entire year with the football program, but you have 17, 18 home games in men's basketball. So it's like you can make your money there, and it's important. And this program has tradition, and this program has legends. It has a great facility. It has it did previously have the NIL support. So can it contend as it is a top 25 or at least 40 to 25 program in America to compete at that level? That is what has to be determined, is ultimately from WVU leadership, where does this program want to go? Does it want to take a step back to let football lead, to compensate its head coaches, assistant coaches, NIL resources, so on and so forth, to let football lead and men's basketball follow? Or can you, with booster support, fund the basketball team to the same level that you were pre Bob Huggins' departure, And can football still maintain or move forward? If you are you cutting off one for another to thrive, is my question. And or can you invest less in basketball and take the bullet while everything works itself out over the course of the next 2 to 3 years in the college athletics landscape? Because it's coming. It's coming that quickly. I heard a podcast recently, Trent Dilfer, who was the, of course, NFL quarterback on ESPN a lot as a media analyst, and now is, I think, the head coach at UAB. And he's saying within 18 months, we could see a position in which if college athletics goes to a true pay-for-play model from the university's top-down standpoint, without collectives having the direct funneling of payments to players, in which outside securities or outside companies want to foot the bill because they see the investment, especially in college football. So we might be seeing a very near future where players at Oregon, well, they already have the Nike, but let's say, another USC has an Amazon logo on their jerseys, or it's just like in the NBA, that these college athletics are going private securities. Like, you heard these in the news, I think it was like late summer or early fall or something, like Saudi Arabia was going to come in and try and fund Florida State. And I don't know. It's kind of wacky. It's a wild world. All cards are on the table. But I just think that we're coming sooner and sooner and closer to a day and age in which West Virginia University, the school, is paying its football players, probably its men's basketball players, and who knows how much to all of its other athletes. And then what does that look like? While abiding by Title IX with the way that it's written, because our national government is a mess and they can't figure out how to help college athletics out in this regard. Another great thing that would happen, not to get super political, is if Governor Jim Justice and the West Virginia legislature would fund less to Marshall with the state budget and give more to West Virginia University. I don't know how that's changed, and why West Virginia's got to suffer for Marshall to thrive. Whoever thinks that's a really great idea from your statewide, state flagship university, who's trying with all of the challenges that it faces athletically, with Ohio State to its west, with Penn State to its east, to so many schools in the Southeastern Conference fighting for players like never before. So it's like, man, if West Virginia could just get some good cards dealt its way, and I think Wren Baker is the dealer. Like, thankfully, been so far so good on a great hire. He said all the right things. He's opened up the pipeline with Country Roads Trust. And I think from here on out, just got to trust in Wren to make these right decisions on the next hire, whoever that is, and then give this coach really. And it's tough because we are just in a, like, what have you done for me lately kind of culture, especially in college athletics, and it just never seems like coaches are afforded much time. Thankfully, Neil Brown has kind of bucked that trend, thanks to Wren Baker, first and foremost, by sticking by him after the tumultuous 2022 season. So I think next year is going to be a rough year from a pure numbers standpoint on this roster. But again, it's already March, people. How are you going to get the national signing day has been long past for next year for basketball. So who are you going to find from a transfer portal perspective? Who are you going to potentially – and I think that's what you need, is you need more numbers at the high school ranks. That was what DeMar Johnson was brought in for, was high school recruiting, and so far he hasn't done anything like that. And obviously it's because of the issues with the stability at the head coaching position that these high-ranking recruits like an Eiler Malik won't commit to now West Virginia with instability at the head coaching position. So that's what it is. West Virginia, step back. What do you want to do with your men's basketball program? Thank you, Josh Eilert. Thank you in the distance, Bob Huggins, but no thanks. we're moving in a new direction. So it'll be interesting. How are you feeling? Are you feeling optimistic for the future? Are you feeling dreadful? Are you feeling kind of in the mid like I am, kind of up and down? I'm just kind of lukewarm, treading water about the men's basketball program. How are you feeling? So leave your comments here on YouTube. If you like this video, smash that like button. Love to have you a subscriber towards the channel. It'll be interesting to see what happens from a hiring standpoint. I'm figuring this will come very soon. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens before the national championship, but it happens afterwards, or we're extending into April. That's probably when we'll get official word and can look finally forward to what happens with this roster and then to next season. And that's kind of why I haven't really spent too much time on this. I'm still very much heartbroken as a big-time fan of Bob Huggins and everything he's done for this program, a native son, to have this chapter end in this fashion. It's taken time. It's still going to take time until somebody else can come in here and see some success. So thanks for tuning in. Hail West Virginia. Let's go.